I'm Traci Austin, your host of the People Strategy Podcast. This show provides interviews with organizational leaders and ongoing coaching experiences that highlight elevating people in organizations through a people strategy roadmap.
Hi, I'm Chad Franzen from Rise 25, the host of the People Strategy Podcast, where we dive into the latest trends and best practices in talent management and organizational development. This episode is brought to you by Elevated Talent Consulting, a leading provider of comprehensive talent management solutions. Whether you're looking to optimize your recruitment process, enhance employee engagement, or develop effective leadership strategies, Elevated Talent Consulting has the expertise to level up your team. Discover how they can transform your workforce at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. My guest today, you may be familiar with Traci Austin. She is a certified HR professional with over 2 decades of experience in building HR departments for small businesses from the ground up. Traci is dedicated to creating an environment where every employee can find fulfillment in their work while achieving business outcomes. Her expertise in employee development, performance consulting, and coaching has made her a highly sought-after consultant in the HR field. As the chief strategy consultant and owner of Elevated Talent Consulting, a certified woman-owned business, Traci has significantly impacted small businesses and HR professionals. She hosts the popular podcast, the People Strategy Podcast, which you're now listening to. It reaches thousands of HR professionals and business leaders globally. Traci, thanks so much for having me today. How are you?
Yeah, thank you so much for leading our conversation today.
Yeah, great to be here. I'm looking forward to our conversation. We're going to kind of talk about onboarding your new employee to optimize team performance.
So one of the things that I would just really want to point out before we jump into our conversation today, Chad, is I want to thank a previous podcast guest. So that is Adam Grzinski from Potawatomi Bingo and Casino, because Adam was a listener that reached out to me and said, "Hey, Traci, I just want to tell you as a manager and now a director, how impactful your podcasts have been to me in growing my department." So, if you go back to the episode that we have with Adam, and I'll have those in the show notes, you can really hear his story about what we're going to talk about today really impacts departments from that manager level.
Yeah, awesome. That's episode 170, People Strategy Insights into Action with Adam Grzinski. Yeah, that's awesome. So check that out in the show notes, and definitely give that a listen. As for today's topic, onboarding your new employee to optimize team performance, why don't you start out by telling me, within the onboarding process, how do you kind of transform that from maybe a mundane process, which is probably what I'm used to, into more of like an engaging team activity?
Yeah. So here's the question that I want to ask first, right? And we may have talked about this a little bit before, but it's like when we look at that preboarding and that onboarding, it's kind of like, Chad, you're married, I believe, I've been married. And it's like when we put that ring on someone's finger, do we talk to them from the day we put the ring on the finger until the day we get married? The answer is yes, right? However, do we actually do that with our team when they sign the offer letter until they start working on that first day? And that's really what we're looking at specifically within this.
Okay. So turning that into a engaging team activity, what does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So turning that into an engaging team activity, if you think about, the proposal and now we're going to go ahead and get married, is that just with the spouse, the two individuals that are going to partner together? No, it is the entire family, right? So if we continue to use that analogy, is the future mother-in-law involved? Oh, yes, she is. Are the siblings involved? Yes, because most likely they're throwing the engagement party and they are, in the wedding and all of the things, right? So as we look at that about a team engagement activity, that team is 100% involved in that person being welcomed into that organization and as colleagues as they're working together. So as we welcome that person in, it's not just HR that talks to them between the offer letter and that onboarding day. It's also the team.
So you kind of mentioned just there the time between the offer letter and the first day of work. Why don't we'll call that pre-boarding? I think that's what you call it.
Yeah, I
Tell
do.
me, tell me kind of what that consists of.
Yeah. So that pre-boarding really consists of getting that person invited and really laying out what is the culture of the organization before they start. So some of those activities include the team reaching out on LinkedIn and inviting them to connect. Some of that includes a new buddy. So, when somebody starts, a lot of times we will assign a new hire buddy to work with them. That buddy is going to reach out and say, hey, what questions do you have? What do you specifically need? Here's what you can expect on the first day. And that's typically somebody that they're going to be working side by side with once they're inside of that organization. So it's not the manager, it's not HR, it is a peer. And that allows that team to really get involved with that. The other ways that we get the team involved in onboarding is having the team really look at how can this person get integrated with our team right away. So there's things that are happening on the back end that they're planning. They're ensuring, hey, here's the projects, here's going to do the training, here's who they're going to work with for this item or that item. And some of that is reached out ahead of time, but there's a lot behind the scenes and how that team wants to work together along with what's happening that's forward facing to that individual.
Who is usually involved in the pre-boarding process?
Yeah, absolutely. So that pre-boarding process, typically HR lays out that infrastructure in coordination and collaboration with the hiring manager. And then the hiring manager is going to work with, hey, who on the team wants to be that new hire buddy, so to say, that buddy, that support of that person as they come on for the first 90 days. So that person's involved. Typically, it's a conversation with the team around, here's the job responsibilities of this new person. What are those key items that they need to know and learn and be engaged with, to be successful in this role? And then we're doing the knowledge transfer. So we're determining who on the team is going to own each piece of that training and learning with that new employee. And this isn't always just the immediate team, right? So if you are in IT, it's not just the IT department, right? Sometimes it's, hey, we are working directly with our programming team because this is how it impacts. So we're going to have, maybe it's a program manager that's going to train on the impacts of the work that they're doing in their area. So it's really looking at a 360-degree view of, it's not just the training of how to do the work, but it's also what is the impact on the rest of the organization within that?
What kind of impact do you think that this pre-boarding has on the new employee beyond the fact that the orientation in the first day will be more streamlined? Like, do you think it impacts his or her attitude or opinion of the job that he or she is getting into?
100%. So what we know is that, and I don't have my stats in front of me, unfortunately, but what we know is that that turnover that happens in the first 90 days can be curbed significantly based on a great onboarding plan and program. Because we know when we feel comfortable, when we feel invited into the conversation and the team, we then are ready to perform. So we, look at onboarding as a, preparing them to perform. And I know we're going to talk about onboarding, a little bit later. We're talking about pre-boarding right now, which is just getting them comfortable essentially to learn, right? So when we can really focus on that time in that pre-boarding period, we're getting them comfortable to learn within them showing up for that first day. So, one of the things that I really want our listeners to think about is how many offers do you make that don't show up for the first day? And if you could curb that number, what would the impact be for your organization on both the dollars that you're spending on recruitment, but also on the results of getting that person in the door and up to speed sooner?
I know in my experience, the first day is often involved filling out a bunch of paperwork. Is that something that can be done at other times?
Yeah, 100%. So a lot of that HR paperwork, right? Now most systems are optimized so that it can all be done ahead of time. Your I-9, your W-4s, all of those items can be done ahead of time. What we do want to make sure from a compliance perspective is that we're not having them do any work ahead of time that could be considered that work under the Fair Labor Standards Act. But we definitely want to get them invited into the team and get some of those things done ahead of time to ensure that they are ready to learn on that first day.
I saw a quote from the co-founder and executive chairman of LinkedIn, Reid Hoffman, where he says, "Pay attention to your culture and new hires from the very beginning." Tell me about the processes with regard to pre-boarding a new employee that kind of impact a culture.
Absolutely. So when we think about culture, I define culture as the behaviors that we allow or don't allow inside of our organization. And so when we think about that, when we're pre-boarding folks in, we're showing them what the culture is before they even walk in the door. And so, through the interview process, we're asking questions to ensure that they're truly aligned with the culture. And then within the pre-boarding process, we're starting to set those expectations of who we are as an organization and what our expectations are. And so as they're getting integrated into things like LinkedIn, if you have a strong marketing presence on LinkedIn, it's going to start showing that, and all those things are going to start showing up for them and them getting excited about it. But also, how are our employees welcoming them in? How are we treating them during that process? Because it's not just the employee that we're bringing into our organization, it's also the family, right? So when we think about how we bring folks in, it's typically a family decision on shifting jobs. Let me ask this, Chad. Anytime you've shifted jobs, which I know has been quite a while, that's a conversation that you're having with your family for multiple reasons.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So if you think about that, what are those key factors that you have with your family about the potential to shift into a new position?
Well, I mean, just to make sure it'll work, I would want to talk about the time this new job will take compared to maybe what we're already used to. Is it going to take up more of my time? Going to take up less of my time? Obviously, if I'm going to end up making a lot more money, that's something that we always like to talk about. And maybe the level of stress that or pressure I might be under, especially at the beginning, compared to my current level, which maybe I'm really used to, and I can just do it, more or less in my sleep, something like that. I think those would be the three main conversations.
Amazing. So for our listeners, write that down so that your new hire buddy can have that conversation with the new employee beforehand. Hey, what are the key factors that you and your family are talking about for you to maybe accept or not accept this job? Or what were those things that you talked about for you to say yes to this, so that they can start to set expectations, which also sets the culture? Because the worst thing that we see happen is that there's almost a bait and switch. We sold this bill of goods, and then you walk in and it's something completely different. We want to make sure that we don't do that. And so continuing that conversation to set expectations and ensure what HR is selling is truly, and what the manager is selling is truly what reality is, or we can sometimes catch those things ahead of time, which even if a person drops out before the first day, if it's not the right fit, we're still saving dollars within that.
So in terms of the impact that pre-boarding can have on culture, I've applied to. I mean, I've been offered jobs before and accepted them, and they said, okay, maybe I accepted it on July 15th. Your first day is August 15th, and I received one email in between, and that was it. Sometimes maybe if there's less time in between, I receive no emails. Just like show up on your first day. What does that say about the culture?
I think it says two things. It can be as simple as people are so busy they don't have time, which
Mm-hmm.
sends a really strong message about what to expect when you step in for the first day. But it also sends, I look at it as, what is the value of the employee coming in, right? So it's looking at that and saying, for me, if I don't hear anything from them, I'm thinking, do they really want me? It's been a month. And on the flip side, if we're doing too much communication, it's like, hold on, let me wrap up where I'm at right now and, respect this time between, like, I'm not doing any work until I come on board. So it is this balance of not too much yet enough to let them know, hey, we're really excited for you to start. So one of our clients sends welcome boxes that has products that the company makes. It's a handwritten note, it's a t-shirt, it's, items that really go along with the company so that they can see, oh, wow, this is what I'm stepping into. This is the product that they make. This is a representation of the organization ahead of time. So they're going, I get it. And the other piece of that is everybody in your family sees that, right? So, if that product is, something that's a food, guess what? Everybody's eating that. And now we're having conversations about that company around the dinner table and why we're excited about it and what it looks like, et cetera.
Is there any value to maybe sending out like a survey to learn about the new employee and maybe their interests?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that we cover in our team retention program. So, what we're talking about today is actually a module 3 of that program. And so, sending a survey out ahead of time, here's the thing with surveys: don't ever send out a survey if you're not going to do anything with it, right? Like it
Hmm.
actually does more damage than good.
Hmm.
However, if you are going to do something with that, what it says is you really want to get to know more about them. So some of the things we love to ask in the survey are fun things, right? Like, hey, what's your favorite restaurant in this vicinity? Because hint, hint, nudge, nudge, that's where we're going to take them on their first day, right? Is there any like pick me ups that you love to snack on at your desk, or beverages, non alcoholic, that, that you like? Great. Guess what? Those, maybe they're there on the first day, but also maybe when there's some big wins and milestones, or even little wins and milestones, those just magically show up, right? It's paying attention to what is important to that person, that you see them as a person and not just productivity creating. So that's one thing with, new hire surveys. I love to ask 2 questions in new hire surveys if I haven't already asked them in the interview. And that is, what is a work bucket list item that you would like to accomplish? And then what's a personal bucket list item? Because that tells me where they want to go and grow. And as an organization, if we can build those things into their career trajectory that makes sense for the business, that's the key word. It has to make sense for the business. Those are things then that also show that, hey, we're listening, we're embedding that value and ensuring you're getting what you want, because we have a mutual relationship here. It's not just one way.
Would there be any value, or would you say there's value to both sides if maybe the team members, not the supervisor or the boss or whatever, sends like a welcome message on LinkedIn or even a card or something like that? Is there value to both sides in doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think so. Here's my caveat to that is we don't want these items to become this burdensome checklist
Mm.
that is done begrudgingly, because that
Hmm.
energy shows through, right?
Hmm.
And so it's ensuring that, hey, that buddy actually wants to be a buddy to this person, and not, I'm volunteering you that this is what you have to do, because that will show through. And so, how we approach it, the intention and the energy around it has a huge impact on how those items are perceived.
So, what does accomplishing all these things then eventually do for the business by the time the employee gets started?
Well, let me ask you this question. Have you ever started a job that you were so excited to start because of the culture and the people?
Once out of like 10.
Okay. And so out of those other 9, if you
Yeah.
think about, like, I had no communication with them or conversation. If you think about the one experience versus the 9, which one did you show up more engaged to on day 1?
Oh, definitely that one. 100%.
Right. So I think there's your answer, Chad.
There you go.
And I'd love for our listeners to do that too. Like, really think about that question, because what it's telling you is what you want to emulate versus what you don't. Because even though, what I say doesn't really matter, right? The whole point of the podcast is really to get you thinking and saying, what can we do that is going to make a significant impact for our environment and for our people, which the outcome of that in turn is going to make my life easier as a manager. Like, if you go back and listen to Adam's episode, he talks about the impact of implementing these things and the impact on his life from it.
The only thing about my experience, that as long as you're talking about that, was that one I definitely showed up 100% more excited than the other ones, but I got the sense that their communication about their culture with me was more like what they wanted it to be, or like it was their ideal rather than what it actually turned out to be. So do you think
Right.
this
That's
it's
the bait
important to
and switch,
communicate
right?
reality? Yeah, exactly. I don't think they intended to do it. I think it was just more like, in my ideal world, this is how we are.
Yeah. And that transparency is incredibly important. Regardless, you showed up more
Yeah,
engaged and then
yeah.
you found out, ooh, this isn't really it. So we had some dissonance later on, right? Whereas maybe with the other nine, did you get what was sold?
Yeah, because they didn't sell much. They talked about the qualifications for the job and how I fit in, and
Right. And did you stay very long?
uh, in some cases yes, in some cases no.
Right. And so just thinking about, hey, how do we ensure that what we're selling is actuality? And if this is something you want to move towards, then move towards it in small steps that is still true. You can still reach out and have that buddy talk very specifically about the culture of the organization that is true when you show up. Guess what? The buddy is still reaching out and doing that. The team's still reaching out and even doing little things like having the entire team. If you have seven people on your team, that will give you, seven connections to dig into even before you show up on the first day. That is still better than no communication between the offer letter and the onboarding.
So we've gone through all of the pre-boarding, or this employee and the company, the business have gone through all of those pre-boarding things, and now we're ready for the first day. How do you kind of foster a sense of belonging from on day one?
Yeah. So here's the key. We want to ensure that day one, all of the ducks are in order, right? Is their desk ready? Is their office ready? Can they get into their training? Can they get into their computer if they have one? If you are hiring for production positions, do you have their schedule laid out for the next week? Are they meeting the team and the manager and getting a win that first day where they feel like, hey, I'm not just, siphoned off with HR only on day one. I'm really starting to get integrated into the team.
And then in terms of the onboarding process, how do you kind of integrate company values, mission, team dynamics, things like that into the process?
Yeah, absolutely. So to integrate those into the process is really thinking about what those are. So, one of I'm just going to name a value from a current client of mine, which is good isn't good enough. And essentially, you get what you tolerate, right? And so the question that I have for the team as we're onboarding new employees is what do we want out of our new employees when they show up? And they'll name what those are. And I'm going, all right, so what are we tolerating right now? And they name what that is. I'm like, all right, so what's the gap between what we're seeing and what we actually want? And how can you influence getting what we want through that pre-boarding process? Now they're telling me what they're going to do to really bring this new person on and support them in a way so that they're showing up in that way. So, it's a lot of the communication really with your team on the behaviors we, exhibit, or if we're working towards it, the more we talk about it, here's the core value, here's the behavior, here's the core value, here's the behavior, then we're able to really align those things together. And that mirroring and that showing to the new employee is showing them this is what I'm walking into as an organization. And the other piece of that, I would say is during your orientation, then you're talking about what those are. And if you know, as an HR person, what was done for the pre-boarding with the team, hey, do you remember when Joe did, called you and asked you very specifically what you needed and, how you wanted to be integrated into the team and how you can contribute to the team, et cetera. Well, that was an example of we is greater than me, of how we truly work together as a team. So now they're starting to make those connections.
Yeah, yeah, very nice. Hey, as we kind of wrap it up here, what is there anything that maybe we should just be sure to keep in mind about the pre-boarding process?
Within the pre-boarding process, we want to make sure that the balance is the right balance for the person coming on. We're not doing too much, but yet we're also not completely ignoring them, that there's really good communication around what to expect on that first day. Because guess what? The first day is a first. And, Brene Brown talks about, she calls them her FFTs, right? These are first times, and you can be creative on what that first F is. But with that being said, within that first times, we don't know what to expect. There's a lot of anxiety that goes into first days. So when we can lower that and have that person feeling comfortable, they're more likely to show up to work that first day in a way that's engaging. And then it's up to us to ensure that what we sold matches what reality is.
Should you plan your communication with this new employee maybe differently if you know they're still finishing their obligation to their previous employer? Maybe they're kind of still devoted to that person and they don't want to have too much, of a barrage of emails or whatever coming at them during that time, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think that there's a couple things here. One, different positions and different levels in the organization are going to be different things, right? What we would say is that clearly they're not doing any work before the first day because that is a violation of the Fair Labor Standards Act. However, at a minimum, is all their pre-boarding paperwork done? Have we, invited them into the team? Has a buddy called them the day before to ensure that they have their questions asked? They know what door to go into. They know what to wear. Do I need to bring a lunch? Don't I need to bring a lunch? And then potentially a survey if you want to do that. So, there's 4 touch points plus the LinkedIn outreach. Those are very minimal time commitments on behalf of the new employee coming in. And yet they're getting that conversation and that interaction with that person. And I'll tell you a quick story. I was hired into an organization at a regional director level. And, I was getting communication from HR, then all of a sudden it fell off. And there was about, I think it was 45 days from when I accepted it to when I started, because I had some planned time off within there. And so I got a call from the VP the week before I started, and he just said, "Hey, I wanted to reach out, really welcome you to the organization, make sure that you had everything you needed, see if you had any questions, et cetera." And I'm like, oh my gosh, the VP 2 levels above the person that I was reporting to called to make sure I had everything that I needed. And that was one where I felt really good at that point in time around, stepping into this new organization.
Yeah, I could definitely see how that would make you feel kind of good and energized for your new job. Hey, Traci, this has been very interesting. I really appreciate you having me today. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we're excited for, those of you listening, if you're like, I want to implement more of this and I want some of these things, check out our team retention program.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much, Traci. I'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks.
So long, everybody.
Thank you so much for listening today. I'd love to connect with you. If you'd like to connect, you can find me on LinkedIn at Traci, Traci Austin, and at our website at elevatedtalentconsulting.com. If you'd love to learn more about our process, please reach out to us. And again, thank you so much for listening and sharing your feedback with us through a review. Have a fantastic day.